You think your life is hard? You wouldn't survive a single day in medieval times. Modern comforts have made us soft. What medieval people dealt with daily would send you running back to the 21st century faster than you can say McDonald's. Let's dive into the brutal reality that would break you within hours. Medieval food, the stuff of nightmares. First, forget everything you've seen in movies about grand feasts with giant turkey legs. For regular folks, meals were bland, boring, and often deadly. Peasants survived on pottage. Basically, a sad, watery soup made from whatever vegetables they could scrounge up, cooked in the same pot for days. It was the medieval version of mystery stew, except instead of hidden vegetables, you got weevils and dirt. Bread was the main food for almost everyone, but nothing like the fluffy stuff we enjoy today. Medieval bread was dense, dark, and filled with unwanted extras. The flour was ground between stone wheels that chipped into the mix. People back then had stronger teeth, not from good genes, but from constantly chewing what was basically rock-filled dough. Here's a terrifying fact. Much of the bread contained ergot, a fungus that grows on rye. Ergot poisoning caused hallucinations, burning sensations, and sometimes death. Some historians believe it contributed to witch hunt hysteria because entire towns would start hallucinating simultaneously. Imagine thinking your neighbor is a witch, when really, your baker just needed to clean his equipment. Meat was a luxury. When people did get it, it was often borderline rotten because refrigeration didn't exist. To mask the taste of spoiling meat, they used heavy spices if they could afford them. Otherwise, you held your nose and hoped for the best. The 5-second rule? More like the 5-day rule. And you couldn't even wash down this awful food with water because drinking it would make you sick. Most water sources were contaminated with human waste. Instead, everyone, including children, drank beer or ale. Not the strong stuff we have today, but a weaker version that was safer than water because brewing killed germs. The average medieval peasant consumed about 8 pints of ale per day. Children as young as 5 regularly drank ale with every meal. The bathroom situation. Pure horror. By now, your stomach is turning. Which brings us to the next medieval nightmare. Going to the bathroom. For most people, this meant using a chamber pot, basically a bowl kept under the bed. Once filled, you'd either empty it yourself or wait for collection. Where did it go? Usually right out the window into the street below. The medieval version of Look Out Below wasn't about falling objects, but falling feces. The common practice in towns was to shout "Gardez-vous" before tossing waste from upper windows. This came from the French phrase meaning, watch out for the water. Of course, by water, they meant something far less pleasant. This was so common that in some cities, waste could only be thrown from windows after 10 p.m. In castles, you might encounter a garde-robe, essentially a hole in a stone seat that dropped waste straight down the castle wall. In Dover Castle, archaeologists found one that dropped waste nearly 70 feet. Kings and queens might have had thrones, but their toilets were just holes with a draft. The job of collecting human waste fell to workers called gong farmers. These brave souls collected waste from cesspits at night and hauled it outside city walls. The smell clung to them so badly they weren't allowed in public gathering places. Despite the awful conditions, they were paid about 4 times what ordinary laborers made. The smell of medieval cities was legendary. The River Thames in London was so polluted, it was described as a monster of stink. Toilet paper? Forget about it. People used whatever was available. Leaves, moss, their left hand, or if wealthy, pieces of wool or hemp. Work A daily grind that would destroy you. Most people were peasant farmers who worked land owned by nobles. Their routine: wake at dawn, work until dusk, collapse into bed, repeat until death. A typical farmer plowed fields with wooden tools pulled by oxen, planted seeds by hand, and harvested crops with basic sickles. During harvest, peasants worked 16-hour days in the baking sun. Records show farm workers burned over 4,000 calories daily just from physical labor. Medieval farmers didn't need gym memberships. They needed to survive Tuesday. For those not farming, trades offered alternatives with their own hardships. Blacksmiths breathed toxic fumes in smoke-filled forges, risking burns and eye injuries. Tanners worked with urine and toxic chemicals that turned their skin yellow. Want to become a skilled tradesperson? Start young. Apprenticeships began at age 7 when children were sent to live with a master craftsman. These young apprentices worked 6 to 7 days a week for up to 14 years before becoming journeymen. Some jobs were designed for the desperate. Link boys were children who carried torches at night for wealthy people. Pure finders collected dog feces to sell to tanners. A day laborer in medieval England earned 1 or 2 pennies per day, just enough to buy 2 loaves of bread. Getting paid minimum wage wasn't a concept. The concept was minimum survival so you don't die before finishing your work. Medicine, where healthcare meets horror. With demanding work and poor nutrition, your body would wear out quickly. Disease was everywhere. And what passed for healthcare would today be considered torture. Medieval WebMD had one diagnosis for everything. You're probably going to die. A simple cold or flu that we treat with rest could be a death sentence. Without understanding germs, medieval people believed illness came from bad air or an imbalance of 4 bodily humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Got a fever? Time for bloodletting. This involved cutting open a vein and draining blood into a bowl. Medieval doctors had one solution. You've got too much blood. Let me fix that. Leeches were another popular treatment. These parasites were applied to the skin to draw out bad blood. One medical text recommended using 70 leeches at once. About 30% of children died before age 5. Average life expectancy was 30 to 40 years. The bubonic plague killed roughly 50% of Europe's population in the mid-14th century. Dental problems were awful. With no toothbrushes or understanding of hygiene, tooth decay was common. Medieval dentists didn't need appointments. They just waited until someone was screaming loud enough to be heard through town. Even available medicines were often deadly. Mercury was prescribed for everything from skin conditions to syphilis. Their prescription drugs didn't need warning labels. The side effect was always, might kill you faster than the disease. Justice, cruel, unfair, and random. The legal system operated on principles that would make modern lawyers scream. Laws varied wildly from town to town. What was legal in one village could get you thrown in a dungeon 5 miles away. Minor offenses like stealing food could result in losing a hand. In medieval England, over 200 crimes carried the death penalty, including cutting down a tree in the king's forest. If accused of a crime, proving innocence often involved trial by ordeal. One method: carry a red-hot iron bar for 9 feet. If your burns healed cleanly within 3 days, you were innocent. If they infected, which was almost guaranteed, you were guilty. Another method was trial by water. The accused was tied up and thrown into a river. If you sank, you were innocent. If you floated, you were guilty and executed. A literal no-win situation. For those found guilty, Execution methods were designed to be as public and terrifying as possible. Drawing and quartering, where the condemned was dragged by horses, hanged until nearly dead, disemboweled while alive, beheaded, then cut into 4 pieces, was reserved for serious crimes. Public executions were community events drawing huge crowds who brought food and drinks like attending a festival. Medieval entertainment options were limited. Watch someone die or stare at your wall. Most chose the execution. Warfare. Constant, brutal, and fatal. Medieval warfare was nothing like the movies. Forget glorious battles with shining knights. Real combat was chaotic, brutal, and almost certainly fatal. Wars happened constantly. The 100 Years' War between England and France dragged from 1337 to 1453. That's 116 years. The average medieval person experienced multiple wars in their lifetime. Only wealthy knights could afford full plate armor, which cost the equivalent of a modern sports car. Most soldiers wore padded cloth, with maybe a few metal plates if lucky. Medieval battles were incredibly lethal. At the Battle of Towton in 1461, roughly 28,000 men died in a single day. About 1% of England's entire male population. Many froze to death in the accompanying snowstorm before seeing combat. Battle wounds were almost always fatal due to infection. For peasants, the worst part wasn't even battles. It was what armies did between fights. Medieval armies lived off the land, taking food and supplies from local villages, burning crops, killing livestock, destroying homes. Sieges were particularly horrific. When an army surrounded a castle or walled town, those trapped inside faced slow starvation. During the Siege of Paris in 885, inhabitants resorted to eating rats, cats, and eventually each other. Disease killed far more soldiers than actual fighting. During the Crusades, European armies often lost half their men to disease before reaching their destination. Daily life. The final straw. If you somehow survived everything else, everyday medieval life found plenty of other ways to make each day miserable. The smell hit you first. Medieval towns reeked of human waste, rotting food, unwashed bodies, tanning chemicals, and slaughterhouse remains. Without garbage collection, trash piled up on streets. Butchers dumped animal entrails right outside their shops. The smell was so overwhelming that people carried herb pouches to hold under their noses. Personal hygiene was practically non-existent. Most people bathed only a few times a year. Many believed bathing opened pores and allowed disease to enter. During winter, people might go 4 to 5 months without washing. Head lice were so common that special combs for removing them were standard grooming tools. Medieval dating profiles would have included only moderate lice infestation as a selling point. Clothing was uncomfortable, rarely washed, and worn until it fell apart. Both rich and poor typically owned only 2 or 3 sets of clothes total. Privacy didn't exist. Most households consisted of one room where everyone ate, worked, and slept together. Beds were shared by multiple family members. The social hierarchy was rigid. The feudal system meant everyone had a fixed place, and social mobility was nearly impossible. About 90% of the population were peasants who owned nothing. Knowledge was limited, and superstition filled the gaps. Most people believed in witches, demons, and magical creatures. A solar eclipse could send an entire town into panic. Communication was slow. News traveled at walking or horseback speed. Information from 50 miles away took days. News from other countries took months. The bottom line, by now, you'd be desperately searching for a way back to comfortable modern life with its antibiotics, indoor plumbing, human rights, and deodorant. The past may seem romantic in books and movies, but the reality of medieval life was a daily struggle that few modern humans could endure even for a day. Your soft, comfortable, disease-free, well-fed life suddenly doesn't seem so bad, does it? Next time you complain about your Wi-Fi being slow or your latte being wrong, remember, you could be drinking 8 pints of weak ale, dodging chamber pot contents, and hoping your bread doesn't give you hallucinations. Medieval times? You wouldn't last until lunch.